Hello everyone and welcome back. We are continuing our series on divination in depth. This is the second video to cover the High Priestess card, also sometimes referred to as the Popess or the Papess. The first video I'm just going to go ahead and link to right up here and let you all know that it covers the debate as to whether or not the Popess card was inspired by a real-life figure, and if that person was Pope Joan, or Saint Guglielma, or a person named Maifreda or Manfreda, who was the cousin of Matteo Visconti. It goes really in depth into each of those theories. It's rather a long, ploddy historical class. This class is covering the High Priestess as it has been portrayed through time, so starting in about the 1450s with the Visconti Sforza deck, all the way up to the modern 21st century, how the card has shifted and how it's been portrayed. And then it will cover the various interpretations of the cards in sort of the main schools of interpretation. So we'll cover the writer Waite Smith, we'll cover the Mathers, we will cover the Thoth or Aleister Crowley interpretation, Etteilla, Ouspensky, Theirens, Paul Foster Case. And then we will go into how the Sanctum readers tend to interpret this card, in particular how I tend to interpret the card, and I will go into it upright, reversed, past, present, future, upright and reversed, for love, work, finances, relationships, and spirituality, upright and reversed. And then we'll cover some questions to ask yourself when it comes up in a reading. If I have time, and this hasn't just become an enormously bloated video, I will also cover common card combinations and some of the ways that it shifts to read this card when you are a queer person or when you are reading for a queer person. As a reminder, I am a queer person, I am queer, I am genderqueer, but I don't know if we'll get there in this video or if there will be a third one. It kind of depends on how enormous this gets, because it may get rather enormous. Anyway, let's get into this. So I said during the last video where we discussed the possibility of the card being inspired by Pope Joan, or by Saint Guglielma, or by Maifreda, the cousin of Matteo Visconti, that there were several other possibilities as well. I'm going to start with discussing those. Similar images to the High Priestess appear throughout late medieval and Renaissance art. A seated or standing woman holding heavily symbolic images that were used to make it clear that the images were allegorical figures. We see this in images of justice with her scale, truth coming out of her well to shame mankind, and even on the existing Statue of Liberty. A female allegorical figure with symbolic objects associated with the papacy would not seem strange, subversive, or gender-flipped in the medieval period or during the Renaissance. There is, in fact, a similar figure in St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican, at the very center of the Catholic Church, which consists of a marble statue of a female pope wearing the papal crown and holding a book and keys. The allegorical figure of the Popess depicted in the statue represents the power of the Church itself, and is obviously not a heretical or subversive figure. There's even a name for these portrayals of the power of the Holy Mother Church as an allegorical female figure. She's named Ecclesia, and Ecclesia in medieval art is sometimes depicted as literally birthing or nursing the church or certain saints. So this isn't a heretical image in the medieval Catholicism, the idea that there would be this female archetypal figure who represents the Holy Church, and we even know the name of this figure. It wasn't until much, much later that decks altered the imagery of the Popess to be the High Priestess, intentionally transitioning the symbolism associated with the card from Christian to ancient Egyptian, and then including more witchcraft and sorcery associated imagery as well. There are several other possibilities as to what allegorical figure might have inspired the Popess imagery as well. The Popess closely resembles the allegorical image of Fides, faith, by Giotto di Bondone, circa 1267 CE to 1337 CE, an Italian painter and architect from Florence during the late Middle Ages. His work on the seven virtues and the seven vices very closely resembles other tarot art, and likely was part of the Neoplatonic and medieval Christian art movement that inspired most of the imagery of the tarot. The image of Fides even has the same cross staff that the Papess holds, that is often given as evidence that the figure is Guglielma, as she is depicted as carrying a very similar one. The figure could also potentially represent the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary is depicted as being crowned with the papal crown in The Coronation of the Virgin by Sienese painter Martino di Bartolomeo. Unknown, active between 1389 CE and 1434 CE. The painting was created in approximately 1400 CE. Another image of the Virgin Mary in a papal crown dates to 1446 CE in England in the charter for the founding of King's College, Cambridge, for which the Virgin was one of the college's patron saints. This image was brought to the tarot history community by Jean-Michel David, and I learned of it through tarot historian Matthew S. Howard. The papal crown, that large cone-like hat that we've referenced several times, is also shown on allegorical personifications of faith and wisdom in medieval art. An image of Sapientia, wisdom, was found in the 13th century manuscript in Florence's Laurentian library, Biblia Mugellana, figure 189. And in it, she not only is wearing the papal crown, but also carries the cross staff and the book as well. As an aside, to learn more about Sapientia as the head of the Wild Hunt in medieval Italy, check out our History of the Dark Period of the Year series. The image is part of an illumination of the first letter of Omnis Sapientia e Domino Deo est et sum illo fuit. All wisdom is from the Lord God, and hath been always with him. From the Bible verse Ecclesiasticus 1:1 from the Douay Rheims translation. The Papess may also be inspired by images of Isis, shown here with Moses to her left and an unknown figure to her right. Some historians claim this actually is a portrayal of Hermes Trismegistus in a fresco by artist Pinturicchio, 1454 CE to 1513 CE, which is preserved in the Vatican. Alternatively, the image could mimic similar images of the priestesses of Venus or Ceres. It is possible that the Papess was meant to represent prudence as well, a cardinal virtue of the Church, often substituted for Plato's virtue, wisdom. In the late Middle Ages and during the Renaissance, the cardinal virtues and allegorical personifications of wisdom and prudence were often interchangeable, and the cross staff and the book identified both. It has also been argued that she represents the Church as opposed to the power of the state, with the Papess/Empress showing this opposition and relationship, and the Pope/Emperor showing this opposition and relationship as well. Alright, the history of the Papess card becoming the High Priestess card in its artistic representations through various decks beginning in around the 1450s and moving to now. The first version of the card was likely in the Visconti Sforza deck from circa 1450 CE. In it, the figure is unnamed and unlabeled. The Mantegna Tarocchi, circa 1450 CE, also does not explicitly have a Papess or Popess card, and historians debate back and forth which of the allegories represented which would most closely map to the card. In the earliest known list of the trumps, the Sermons de Ludu Comalis, also called the Steel Sermon, from circa 1470 CE, the card is numbered 4 and is La Papessa, following after number 2, which is the Imperatrix, the Empress, and number 3, which is the Imperatori, the Emperor. Intriguingly, the Sermons de Ludu Comalis said about La Papessa, "O wretched it is what the Christian faith denies." In the Solabusca deck, the earliest completely extant example of a 78-card Toroki deck from the late 15th century, the Popess or Papess is not explicitly included under that name, and tarot historians debate which card would most closely represent similar ideas and concepts. The early Italian and French block print decks from the 15th and 16th century show a generic and likely uncontroversial at the time figure who is the counterpart to the Pope. In the Budapest tarot from the last quarter of the 15th century, the Popess holds a bishop's crook and the keys of St. Peter. On the Rosenwald sheet, although the Fool is absent, the card is still numbered 2 and is labeled La Papessa. In the recolored Rosenwald deck from about 1500 CE, both the Popess and the Pope hold a very large key, and the Popess holds a book in her other hand. The French Popess from the mid-16th century is very similar to early Italian cards. The figure is depicted holding a book and a very large key that's nearly identical to the Pope's key. In all of these examples, as well as in the later Tarot de Marseille, the Papess's crown has 2 levels rather than 3, differentiating her crown from the Pope's 3-level crown. The Carey sheet, a mid-16th century partial uncut sheet from a woodblock print that is the earliest known example of a Tarot de Marseille style deck, depicts the Popess standing at an altar with a kneeling priest at her feet. In the Jean Noblet tarot from around circa 1660 CE, the Popess is called La Papess and is depicted as would become the standard for Tarot de Marseille Popess cards. One noteworthy exception to the standard imagery of the 17th century Papess and Popess cards was the work of the Catholic designer Giuseppe Maria Metelli. In 1664 CE, during a period when the Catholic Church had acquired a more skeptical attitude to the history of a possible female pope, Metelli replaced the normal pope and female pope cards with depictions of a standing and seated pontiff, both bearded and therefore male. The Pope and Popess were seen as problematic in some heavily Protestant regions of France, Germany, and Switzerland by the 18th century, as the Protestant populations did not want Catholic imagery on their decks. So the Popess and Pope were replaced as figures with those from other regions or from secular culture. The Besançon decks substituted the Roman deities Jupiter and Juno for the Pope and Popess. In Belgium and northern France, the Spanish captain, a character from the Commedia dell'arte, replaced the Popess, while the Pope was replaced with Bacchus. In Bologna, the century saw the creation of a new Bolognese-style deck, as the Pope's emissary in Bologna decreed that the Empress, Emperor, Pope, and Popess were all to be replaced by 4 depictions of Moors. By the late 17th century, the Tarot de Marseille pattern became the standardized norm for many decks, showing the Popess as a seated woman wearing a heavy cloak and the papal tiara, while holding an open book in her lap with both hands, with a curtain with furled edges behind her head. Some of the explicitly religious items displayed in earlier decks, such as the staff with a triple cross or bishop's crook and the keys of St. Peter, were eliminated. However, the papal triple crown still remained. The Popess was called the High Priestess publicly for the first time in Antoine Coeur de Jabelin's 1781 CE book of pseudo-anthropology Le Monde Primitif, illustrated by Mademoiselle Linot. De Jabelin renamed the Pope and Popess Le Grand Prêtre and Le Grand Prêtresse, the High Priest and High Priestess, and said they were a married couple, and claimed that this was accurate to the Egyptian religious leaders who bore those titles. His card description had the High Priestess wearing the horns of Isis, but his illustration of the card was nearly identical to the Tarot de Marseille pattern. An anonymous artist, probably in the 1790s CE, created a card inspired by de Jabelin that featured Le Grand Prêtre and Le Grand Prêtresse in place of the Pope and Popess. Both figures are depicted standing, with laurel wreaths on their heads, and they are each depicted holding a palm branch. Only one copy of this deck survives to this day, which is held in an American private collection. A large influence on the subsequent development of the Popess card into the modern portrayal as the High Priestess was likely Eliphas Levi's description in his 1856 CE book, Transcendental Magic. A woman is crowned with a tiara, wearing the horns of the moon and Isis, her head enveloped in a mantle, the solar cross on her breast, and holding a book on her knees, which she conceals with her mantle. Levi also attributed the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Beth, to the Popess and High Priestess, and associated the card with sanctuary and with gnosis, as well as with the house of God and the body of the occult church, which likely started the association of the card with the idea of some kind of a pagan inner sanctum. Side rant here, please check out my video at some point on how pagan doesn't really mean what we think it means, but we all use it that way anyway. In a time frame of about a century, 3 Etteilla-style decks were created that featured the card Prudence, that may be Etteilla's version of the Popess or High Priestess, but which may also be his version of the Hanged Man. The circa 1910 Etteilla 1, Sumada's Etteilla 2, date unknown, and LaRue Etteilla 3, also date unknown, are shown here, and you can see the similarities between them. And in the case of the Etteilla 1, you can also see the similarities between La Prudence and the card that we call the Hermit, which some people have drawn comparisons to as well. As you can see, she's hesitating before a snake in her path. In the Etteilla-style deck, Jeu de la Princesse Tarot, also called Tarot's Egyptians, from 1843 CE by Laurembert under the pseudonym Johannes Trismegistus, the card is still called Prudence and again is depicted with a snake in the path. The English version of the Etteilla 3 deck was the first Etteilla deck to feature a card explicitly called the High Priestess, and the imagery is identical to previous Etteilla decks' depictions of the Prudence cards. It just has the label, the High Priestess. 19th century occultist Oswald Wirth said of the High Priestess card, "She is the priestess of mystery, Isis, the goddess of deep night, and without her help the human spirit could not penetrate darkness." In 1887 CE, Stanislaus de Goethe, founder and grandmaster of L'Ordre Kabbalistique de la Rose-Croix, asked Wirth, a member of the order and an amateur artist, to create a deck embodying the order's teachings, which were heavily influenced by Eliphas Levi. Wirth created 350 copies of his deck and then colored each one by hand to be distributed to fellow initiates. I can't even imagine this kind of undertaking, so he designed 78 cards and then had those printed as woodblock prints and then painted 350 decks consisting of those 78 cards. That is an enormous undertaking and not one that I can quite comprehend taking on myself. And then, additionally, he redesigned the deck. Wirth redesigned his original 1887 CE deck in the early 20th century in order to make it conform more closely to Eliphas Levi's writings. The card with the most obvious changes from the 1887 CE is La Papess, who acquired a carved sphinx on her throne and a Taijitu symbol on her book cover, as well as a veil that partially covers her face. Wirth reinterpreted the papal crown as 2 rows of precious gems representing Hermeticism and Gnosis, and he placed a crescent moon on the top. He also made the curtain behind La Papess attached to 2 pillars in order to reinforce the idea that the figure is guarding the entrance to an inner sanctum for all except worthy initiates. Wirth and his colleague Papess called this figure the Priestess of Mysteries and Goddess of the Night, and claimed that she represented someone who possessed higher esoteric wisdom and secrets that were known only to a few. They emphasized a connection between the High Priestess and the lunar qualities of reflected light, passive receptivity, and knowing, but choosing to keep silent. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn became popular in London in 1888 CE. They associated the High Priestess card with the moon, Isis, and water, and referred to the card as the Priestess of the Silver Star. She was said to preside over all things that fluctuate, wax, and wane, and which are partially hidden. They claimed the card was associated with the Hebrew letter Gimel. The most popular and well-known High Priestess card was created by 2 former members of that aforementioned Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, A.E. Waite and Pamela Colman Smith, in around 1909 CE. They based their design again on Eliphas Levi's writings, as Wirth had done prior to them. The High Priestess in the Waite Smith deck is depicted wearing the horns of Isis with an equal-armed cross on her breast, which is said to represent a balance of dualities. Rather than a book, the figure holds a scroll labeled Torah. The pillars behind the figure are black and white and is inscribed with the letters of Boaz and Yachem. Each were claimed to again represent a duality, the active and passive duality, which the members of the Golden Dawn claimed were also inscribed on the pillars of the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. The curtains behind the High Priestess are embroidered with pomegranates and palms. In his book, The Pictorial Key to the Tarot, written in 1910 CE, Waite referred to the High Priestess as the secret church, the Shekinah, the spiritual bride, the supernatural mother, and the daughter of the stars. He claimed that, in some respects, the High Priestess was the highest and holiest of all of the major arcana. The imagery based on Eliphas Levi's writings and popularized by the work of Worth, Waite and Smith became the standard for the 20th century, combining appropriated Hebrew symbolism, Catholic symbolism, and what we call pagan symbolism, but really is just non-Roman symbolism, into a single card. In the 21st century, the High Priestess card became increasingly associated with witches, sorceresses, and fortune tellers. Decks heavily influenced the lunar associations and largely abandoned the Christian imagery from the card's origin. Here you can see the Robin Wood Tarot from 1991 CE, again playing up this lunar symbolism. She's wearing a moon on her tiara. Is it called a tiara when it goes around that part of their head? I think it's called something else. Is it a diadem when it's like this? I think it might be a diadem.
It might be a coronet.
Oh, it's a coronet. Thank you. It's a coronet. You can see she's holding a crystal ball. There's the moon in the background. In the Legacy of the Divine Tarot, you can see it's really stressing, again, the lunar symbolism, and then the pomegranate as well. In the Chrysalis Tarot from 2016, the card is just straight up a sorceress card and is portrayed, with this big bubbling cauldron and mushrooms. In the Transformation Tarot from 2012, again, it's a sorceress, and there's the crystal ball and the moon, and there's the deck of cards. So, kind of all over the place. All right, moving right along. In the Rider-Waite Smith interpretation, the High Priestess is numbered 2. Rider-Waite Smith deck claimed that the card represented secrets, mystery, the future as yet unrevealed, the woman who interests the querent if male, the querent herself if female, silence, tenacity, mystery, wisdom, and science. Reversed, the Rider-Waite Smith interpretation says the card represents passion, moral or physical ardor, conceit, and surface knowledge. The Thoth interpretation of the card is purity is to live only to the highest, and the highest is all. Be thou as Artemis to Pan. Read thou in the book of the law and break through the veil of the Virgin. Pure, exalted, and gracious influence enters the matter. Hence, change, alternation, increase and decrease, fluctuation. There is, however, a liability to be led away by enthusiasm. One may become moonstruck unless careful balance is maintained. The High Priestess is the moon, despite another major arcana of the same name. It reflects the lunar phases, so expect a lot of change and fluctuation in the situation. The Golden Dawn, as we said, interpreted it as the priestess of the silver star and claimed that it represented change, alternation, increase and decrease, and fluctuation. Mathers said the card was science, wisdom, knowledge, education, and that reversed it was conceit, ignorance, unskillfulness, and superficial knowledge. Etteilla claimed that the card represented the female querent, the woman who most interests the querent if male, nature, rest, peace, quiet, retreat, a withdrawn life, alone, retirement, the temple of heat, silence, and tenacity. Reversed, it was still supposed to be the female querent, as well as reproduction, the Garden of Eden, effervescence, bubbling, fermentation, ferment, leaven, and acidity. A.E. Theirens called the card Taurus and said, the second stage in macrocosmic evolution is the polarity of the omnipotent might of self, omnipotent possibility of the field of manifestation, universal passive richness, the Kamaduk or most beloved wish cow of the Hindus. The macrocosmic field is the temple of the great magician or architect, in potency at least. It is the bull, Taurus, of astrology, the house of sound, art, faith, and richness. To speak truly, it is not so much sound as the principle of the sound box, sound itself having its origin in the next step. Therefore, Papess may well compare this card with the hieroglyphic meaning of the Hebrew letter Beth, which relates to the mouth of a man as the organ of speech. But it is not God the Son, as he says elsewhere. It might well be called God the Woman, the Divine Mother, the Eternal Feminine, as the passive richness of the universe awaiting him that will be able to see it and appreciate it. This principle may well be symbolized by the image of the High Priestess, sitting in an attitude of waiting between the pillars of the temple, B and J, standing for the two, which will spring the worlds of spirit and of matter. Being supreme objectivity, it is the symbol of receiving, of possessing, of cult, and adoration. It symbolizes womanhood in general, as the first card symbolized manhood. Paul Foster Case said that the card was La Papess. The keys in the Nap version repeat Oswald Worth's variation from the older symbolism. They do not belong properly to this card. The lunar crescent surmounting her crown identifies La Papess as the tarot symbol of the moon. The symbol of Mercury on her breast suggests that she reflects the power of the preceding key, just as the subconscious mind, whose principal power is memory, is responsive and reflective in all its activities, which are controlled from the mercurial or self-conscious level. He claimed that the meaning of La Papess was the same as those of the moon in astrology: fluctuation, reaction, change, alternation, increase and decrease, instability, secrets, things hidden, the unrevealed future. Whether these meanings are good or evil depends altogether upon the dignity of the card and the divinatory layout. P.D. Ouspensky called the card the High Priestess and claimed that it represented occultism, esotericism, mysticism, theosophy, initiation, Isis, and mystery. So having learned all of these different perspectives on the card and the way the meaning has changed over time, one can see how it might be a little difficult to decide how to interpret it. So is it supposed to be this figure of wisdom and prudence and fidelity? Is it supposed to be this allegory of the body of the church and the power of the church? And is this supposed to be the social sheltering arm of this institution? Is it supposed to represent the tension, spirituality versus religion? Or is it supposed to represent religion as a tension versus the state? Is it supposed to be this ancient figure of the moon mysteries and fluctuation? There's a lot that goes into interpreting the High Priestess depending upon who you're going with. So all that being said, I'm going to kind of go through how I personally interpret the card and how I teach my students at Sanctum to interpret the card. But by all means, as usual, please make up your own damn mind, and it works better for any tarot reader to keep a journal of how a card comes up and what situations it's associated with over and over and over again and develop their own meanings than to go off of like any one person's say-so. I won't belabor that point because I've gone on and on about it. Wow, I really can't talk in other videos. So moving right along. Keywords: the social body of the church or temple, the inner sanctum of any spiritual path, intuition, sacred knowledge, the unconscious mind, mystery, spirituality, inner voices, clarity, discernment, wisdom, prudence, desirability, unattainability, creativity, secrets, the occult or esoteric, counterculture, heretical beliefs, the spiritual veil, fertility, the female divine in gender essentialist neo-paganism and gender essentialist witchcraft. Keywords reversed: secrets, disconnection from intuition, withdrawal, isolation, repression, being caged, restriction or being restricted, hidden motives, lies, deceit, gossip, secrets being revealed, and cognitive dissonance. The High Priestess has a fairly well-established modern interpretation as a card of intuition and internal guidance. However, there are lessons to be taken from the older interpretations as well. The card may have originally represented something closer to the social body of the spiritual path, the church or temple as a place of sanctuary, rest, guidance, and healing. In some possible schools of thought, it represented the guidance of spirit. Specifically and originally, if you look to some of the possible inspirations for the Visconti Sforza version of the card, it may have represented the guidance of the Holy Spirit. But that could be extended to any spiritual guidance that came from non-dogmatic, non-patriarchal sources. Additionally, it sometimes represented heretical knowledge or knowledge that needed to be kept secret. While the Pope or Hierophant represents instructed knowledge and the church or temple as a place of more rigid authority and guidance, the Popess or High Priestess can represent the wisdom, guidance, and shelter provided by religion or spirituality in a non-restrictive fashion, gentler, softer, kinder, or more like a haven, or something that encourages the person to trust themselves rather than to trust in an authority figure. The High Priestess is the guardian of the subconscious mind and the teacher of sacred knowledge and hidden mysteries. Sitting at the threshold of the conscious and subconscious mind, the High Priestess has an innate ability to travel between these realms effortlessly. She teaches that the world is not always as it seems. And more profound influences are often at play. She sits before the thin veil of awareness, offering opportunities to pursue creative understanding of the universe and a heightened awareness of secret or hidden information. The High Priestess signifies spiritual enlightenment, inner illumination, divine knowledge, and wisdom. The High Priestess often shows up in tarot readings when the veil between the inner and outer self should be crossed, or when the veil between the mundane world and the spirit world should be crossed. The card signifies a time to tune into intuition, that the answers someone seeks will come from within, from a place of deepest truth and knowing, or from a place of spiritual guidance. The card can represent that it would be a good time to practice spiritualism, mediumship, meditation, visualization, otherworldly journeying, and or to join a spiritual community that is, as we've described, non-rigid, non-dogmatic, and non-patriarchal. The card can represent that there's an insular spiritual community that can teach in a more intimate fashion as compared to a larger and more demanding religious community. The card can represent that any useful information and assistance will either comes from a person's subconscious mind or from someone who assists them in understanding the needs of their inner self. For this reason, it can sometimes represent a mental health professional. As much as it can represent a figure of spirituality. The figure can represent that a person is entering into a period of heightened intuitive ability and psychic insight. Finally, the High Priestess can be a signal that encourages a person to embrace their intuition, their inner wisdom, and their spirituality. It can also represent that a person should remember when to keep silent, when to keep secrets, and when to conceal their own spiritual progress. The High Priestess emphasizes creation rather than destruction, nurturing guidance rather than inflexible instruction, shelter rather than overprotection, intuition rather than logic, self-trust rather than trust in an outer authority. Further interpretations. The basic meaning reversed. Reversed, the High Priestess can symbolize that someone does need to seek outside of themselves or to refocus on the greater outer world. It can also equally mean that someone has over-relied on instinct, kept secrets that should not have been kept secret, or over-isolated from the broader community within a smaller and more insular one. The secretive nature of the High Priestess can also represent hidden agendas. It can also symbolize that someone is not confronting the areas of the self that need to be confronted. Not everything within a person is a voice that should be trusted or a will that should be allowed to steer. However, the card reversed can also mean that a person isn't taking the time to direct their attention inward to their own wisdom and is instead being swayed or swept away by external pressure. Equally, it can mean that the person can't get in touch with their intuition, that they're trying to, but that they can't seem to get to it. Reversed, the card can not only mean that someone kept secrets that should not have been kept secret, but it could mean almost the opposite, that secrets were revealed that shouldn't have been. So it's good to draw a clarifying card. In the past position, upright, the High Priestess can represent that a person put their intuition to good use when making a major decision, and that this will have served the person well moving forward into the present. The person should keep listening to their inner voice for the issue at hand. It can also represent that the person joined a new coven, circle, temple, or grove, or found a new spiritual teacher that is sheltering or kind or offers gentle guidance and not rigid dogma. It can also signify that a person learned new spiritual skills, such as learning the tarot or taking a mediumship class. The card can also mean that a person kept a secret, and it turned out for the best that they did so, or that they kept their own counsel and refused to be involved in gossip or drama. Past reversed. Reversed in the past position, the High Priestess can symbolize that a person didn't listen to their intuition or their inner guidance, and that a situation went poorly for them due to this. It can also mean a person tried to force through a situation using only logic and reason without considering the messages from their subconscious. In the past, the High Priestess can represent a time when someone was disconnected from their inner wisdom. It can also represent that a person needed to find a spiritual teacher or a welcoming, sheltering spiritual group, and instead either couldn't find that or they found a bad spiritual teacher or group, one that encouraged them to ignore their own wisdom and instincts, or which forced them into a strictly defined and ill-fitting role. It can also mean that a person had a yearning to learn new spiritual skills, but that they weren't able to do so, either due to a lack of instruction or a lack of clear direction. And lastly, it can represent that a person failed to keep a secret and that spilling the beans went poorly for them. Additionally, however, it can represent a time that someone did keep a secret that they shouldn't have kept. So it's wise to pull a clarifying card. In the present position, the card can represent that any knowledge of how to fix any current issues will not come from overthinking and rationalizing, but rather through intuition and self-reflection. This tarot card can also represent sacred knowledge and wisdom, so getting it in the present position can be a push for a person to seek out instruction on occultism, esotericism, spirituality, etc., generally from an insular but inclusive source. Or they may have just recently found instruction on the same. Additionally, it can represent that now is a good time for a person to stay quiet about something and trust only their own counsel, rather than spread the knowledge of whatever is happening around to the greater community. Present reversed. A person may need to find external guidance as their internal guidance may not be trustworthy. Equally so, a person may not be able to get in touch with their internal guidance, and so may need to take more time or effort to address that difficulty, maybe take some time to themselves. The card can also represent that a person is seeking guidance and instruction on occultism, esotericism, spirituality, etc., but that they are either struggling to find it or are only finding it in a false form that should not be relied upon. Lastly, in the present reversed, it may represent that someone is struggling to keep silent on something, to keep to their own counsel, and that secrets are about to come out that should not. Future. For the future position, the High Priestess represents an upcoming period where a person should trust their intuition and their internal guidance. Additionally, it can represent that a period is coming up where a person will have opportunities to build their wisdom and spiritual abilities and insight. The card in the future position can also signify that a person is going to grow in that direction, becoming more independent, self-assured, wise, and insightful, or that they could seek out instruction and assistance from someone represented by the card. Lastly, in the future position, it can caution a person to expect a period where they need to be self-reliant and cautious with secrets, and to rely on their own knowledge rather than any outside input from rigid or controlling sources. Future reversed. In the future position reversed, the High Priestess can caution a person that steps they are taking in the present are moving them away from being able to trust themselves. They may be shoving down or silencing their own instincts or over-relying on the instructions of others to their own detriment. In the future reversed position, the card can also signify that a person received instruction or guidance from a spiritual, occult, religious, or esoteric source that will be revealed to be incorrect, damaging, controlling, or false. The reversed High Priestess in the future position can also caution that there will be secrets revealed or lies exposed that may hurt the person. Work. For work-related readings, the High Priestess may signal a period of education or higher learning. The person may be returning to school for training. If the person is in a creative field, this card can also suggest new inspiration coming into their work. When making decisions about future careers or projects, the High Priestess also suggests relying on gut instincts. At times, this card can also signal the appearance of a mentor or a guide that can aid a person to progress further in their work. It is also possible that the card represents a work environment where there is a lot of gossip and where that secrets or hidden information will be revealed to the person. The card advises that the person keep their own counsel and not be tempted to join in with the outing of secrets. Work reversed. Reversed in a work reading, the High Priestess can symbolize that a person feels isolated. It can also represent that a person feels that they are not being given opportunities to show how their own skills and abilities would benefit the workplace. It may also represent that when it comes to making career decisions, the person isn't listening to their intuition. They may be forcing themselves to trust a business associate despite a gut feeling that they don't have the best intentions, or they may be staying in a job that isn't a good fit, despite their intuition telling them that their current job isn't right for them. Not that you always have the opportunity to just up and quit and get something else, but still. This card can also suggest that a colleague or group of colleagues have hidden agendas. It can also represent that a person is letting themselves be drawn into gossip and the spreading of rumors or lies and should keep silent and stay out of it. Keep to their own counsel. Love. The High Priestess is a card of mystery and secrets, which can be positive for matters of the heart or negative. It may represent, upright, that a person is forming a deep spiritual connection to another in a romantic and/or sexual fashion. It can also be a symbol of fertility and sexuality in general. I was asked recently by a private tarot student, what's the difference between the fertility of the High Priestess and the fertility of the Empress? And really struggled to explain this, but after about 15 minutes of sort of chatting about it, the student actually contributed the best language for this I've ever come across, which is that the High Priestess is associated with fertility from the neo-pagan male gaze, and the Empress is fertility from more of the cis female gaze, where it's, this is my kingdom that I should protect and that I am responsible for and that I should, take care of, and this is my domain. Whereas the High Priestess is this kind of icky, oh, you are fertile, nubile, and sexual cis male neo-pagan gaze thing. So yeah, I don't particularly like associating it with fertility, but ever since Oswald Wirth and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, it has been. Anyway, moving right along. However, it can also represent that a person needs to trust their own instincts and wisdom rather than the input of others on their relationships. It can also represent secrets. So upright, that could be a relationship that is being kept private in the moment, or that the partner or partners within the relationship should not be sharing something private outside of the bounds of their relationship with one another. Not all the business within your relationships should be told to parents, for example. So it could be a sign that y'all need to keep your business private, or that by banding it about and not keeping your own counsel, your relationship is being impacted by what people are saying, which doesn't mean you should keep it secret if ever a partner or partners are hurting you. Love reversed. Reversed in a love reading, the High Priestess can represent that difficulties have developed or may develop if the person continues to ignore their intuition. The person may also need to avoid patriarchal pressure to always be pleasing, sexual, or open to whatever their partner or partners want from them. They may need some distance or self-trust in reinforcing their own boundaries. The card is also associated with secrets, and reversed, that can mean that either the person is keeping their true self from their partner or partners to the detriment of the relationship, or that secrets are being kept that shouldn't be, or that secrets are being revealed that shouldn't be. So again, clarifying cards. Finances. As the High Priestess is related to mystery and to the unknown, the person should possibly be wary of discussing their finances with others. Again, the person's intuition should be trusted. Act only when it feels right, no matter what the numbers on paper look like. The High Priestess can also represent hidden depths. This can be unusual ways to gain financial stability or opportunities that others might miss that will be understood if the person pays close attention and acts when their instincts tell them to do so. So, I don't mean MLMs, just to be clear, like that there are ways you can make money that other people wouldn't expect. I don't mean MLMs, no multi-level marketing, no pyramid schemes. Finances reversed. If the High Priestess is drawn reversed for finances, there may be details that a person is missing. The person may not have all the information they need in order to make a good decision. They may also not be receiving guidance that they can actually trust, and they can only rely on their own instincts. A group of people or a particular person may not be being completely honest with the person in regard to finances. The person should seek more of the hidden information before making any major financial decisions, as things are not as they appear on the surface. Additionally, the person should, again, not share private information, or this could be a sign like not to share it with just like anybody, but to go share it with an authority who may be able to provide advice. So like find a second opinion. It can be either one of those. So again, get it clarifying. In a health context, the High Priestess may instruct the person to listen to the messages their body is trying to send about what it needs. Unfortunately, the High Priestess may also indicate that a person is not being taken seriously in relation to their health concerns. They should trust their own instincts and the knowledge that they have of their body and seek better counsel. The card can also signify that the person should believe in their own concerns and advocate on their own behalf. I'm not saying that's easy. There may be answers about a health concern that have not come to light yet. Seeking that information can be exhausting, but the High Priestess may indicate that the information is there to be found. Sexuality and fertility are both indicated by the High Priestess, so the card could be positive to draw upright in readings regarding either of those if that's what you're looking for. Health reversed. The High Priestess can be a little difficult to interpret for health-relating readings reversed because it can both signify that a person isn't trusting their instincts and is trying to logic themselves out of their just concerns regarding their health or treatment, and also that they should seek a second opinion and not isolate. The person should trust their instincts, but also follow the instructions of a professional physician, even if that means finding one who is more understanding and sheltering and less rigid or judgmental or unhelpful. The person can also signify a person is ignoring signs of a hidden issue, which can mean that they are ignoring important symptoms. Additionally, the card reversed for health can mean that secrets are being revealed that shouldn't be. So either the person is sharing their health-related concerns with those who cannot be trusted, or their secrets are being shared by a healthcare provider who shouldn't be sharing them. And as always, you have that flip on the secret where it can mean that secrets should be revealed that are being kept silent. So for health, that could be maybe it's time to tell someone what's going on with you in a health context. Maybe that means reporting a physician for doing something unethical. Maybe that means talking with your partner or partners or friends or family about what's going on with you in a health context. Spirituality. The High Priestess card is a card of spirituality and sacred wisdom. It is a very good card to draw upright for issues of spirituality, as it signifies that the person is progressing well on their spiritual path. It can also represent that the person has found or will soon find a group with which to be spiritually social and learn more in a sheltering, safe, and supportive environment. Or it can mean that the person will find or has found a good teacher who offers excellent spiritual guidance without rigid expectations. As always, the card represents trusting intuition and understanding that there is more going on beneath the surface than it may appear at first. A person who draws the High Priestess for spirituality should take time to assess what their own internal guidance instructs them to do moving forward. When the High Priestess reversed appears in a spirituality reading, the person may be struggling to hear or interpret their own inner voice. They may be overly relying on the spiritual guidance of others, or may need to isolate in order to get away from the spiritual noise that is overwhelming their own internal guidance. Additionally, the card reverse for spirituality may signify that a person has not or cannot find a good spiritually fulfilling environment with others in order to practice. Either the group or instructor they found is harmful to them, or they simply haven't found one. Many people confuse being religious with being spiritual. They are often completely different things. The person may be bound up in an unhappy religious environment while seeking a spiritually fulfilling one. The card can also represent secrets that haven't been discovered, and when reversed for spirituality, that may mean that the answers someone seeks will either be inaccessible or they'll be painful. The card can also signify secrets that weren't kept and should have been, so a privacy violation, or a person who is speaking of their spiritual progress with someone who shouldn't be trusted with that information. Look, if you're a witch, not everybody should be told that. I magically changed the lighting because I had to take an hour to go do something, and the sun went down. Whew. So, common card combinations with the High Priestess. Honestly, I have pulled the High Priestess with so many different cards in so many different readings, and I wish that I could think of absolutely every single one that I've ever pulled and how important it was to how it changed the meaning of the card or emphasized the meaning of the card. And I literally could not take the time to go through every single thing that's come up. And I also just I would love to create like the ultimate guide to card combinations, but the so many would be created. Anyway, I digress. So the Priestess and the Moon come up a lot for me, and I think that reinforces keeping one's own secrets and keeping one's own counsel. It emphasizes that angle that there are hidden depths, that not all is as it seems on the surface, and that one should be armoring themselves and stepping away in order to get in touch with their own intuition and determine how best to proceed. So I think that it really emphasizes that particular angle. However, all that being said, if you are doing a spirituality rooted reading and you're pulling things like the High Priestess, the Star, the Moon, if there are a lot of wands being drawn, then this might actually be emphasizing sort of the lunar mysteries angle on the card, and the waxing and the waning and the cycles. So it kind of depends on the context of the reading. The High Priestess reversed and the Devil reinforces the idea that a person cannot find the guidance and shelter of a healthy spiritual community or a trustworthy teacher, but rather that this person is being taught by one who is restrictive, controlling, dogmatic, authoritative, either an entire community of these people or one person in particular. It can similarly be represented by the High Priestess reversed and the Pope reversed being drawn together, but in my particular experience as a reader, that's come up when the dogmatic structure is specifically Christian, whereas the Devil has come up for all kinds of group, kink group, BDSM groups, coven circles, temples, groves. Okay. The High Priestess with the Death card, in my personal opinion, is actually a positive association, although it does mean a period where one path ends and another begins. And for matters of learning to trust one's own instincts and listen to their intuition and find spiritual shelter and keep to their own counsel, and learn who they really are, sans somebody telling them who they are, and learn how they really feel, sans someone telling them what to feel or them arguing themselves and logicking themselves out of how they feel, that can be a rather painful cycle of ending and new beginning. The High Priestess already emphasizes that waxing, waning, these cycles. So the Death card can literally be saying, you know, we're entering into the next cycle of this period of growth and transformation. And the High Priestess and the Hermit together, both upright, can emphasize that element of isolation and self-trust, that one should get away from the many voices around them, the gossip, the noise, and really seek to clearly hear their own inner voices and learn to trust those inner voices. So it emphasizes the isolation element, the go find yourself, go seek within, go learn who you really are, go plunge into that subconscious mind and get away from the world if that's what it takes in order to do it. Now, again, that comes from a place of privilege, and not everybody can like go rent a cabin in the mountains for a couple of days. So you do whichever version of that is within your socioeconomic possibilities. And the High Priestess and the Two of Pentacles, again, emphasizes that waxing and waning, but with the additional element of learning from the past. It can be that a person who is seeking stability and firm ground beneath their feet should learn from past times that they haven't been on stable ground and trust their instincts in order to not make the same mistakes that they made in the past. The High Priestess reversed and the Four of Cups come up when a person is overly focused on the spiritual, the sacred, the secret, and the esoteric, and is losing track of the other things that matter. Ian jokes that this particular combination is, yes, you followed your intuition, you bought all these witchy tools, and you're on this spiritual path, and all your guides are so invested in you making this spiritual progress, but did you pay the rent? Okay. The High Priestess and the Knight of Swords emphasizes keeping secrets and staying armored against hidden forces. The idea here is, yeah, there is more going on beneath the surface, and you need to stay on your own path, and you need to keep your own counsel, and you need to keep your own secrets, and you need to be armored against people, and use your keen instincts to keep yourself safe. The High Priestess and the Five of Wands can represent that a person needs to get away from conflict, arguments, tension, gossip, and disagreements, and seek some isolation to work out what they actually feel and who they really trust. But it can also mean that when they're going, so in particular if the High Priestess is reversed and you're drawing it with the Five of Wands, it can be like you're trying to get into your head and process all of that subconscious, and you're just finding all these arguing, disagreeing factions. You're torn in, this person, maybe not you, this person is torn into too many different people inside, all who want different things, all who have different opinions, and all who are at odds with each other. So that can be a really hard thing to see in a reading. Okay. Queer Tarot. The High Priestess frequently shows up when people are transitioning in their life, when they are questioning who they are, when they are questioning what they want, when they are questioning what they actually feel about something, when they're saying, hey, I know what I have been told, I know what I have been taught, I know that I have been instructed from these dogmatic and restrictive authority figures that this is how things should be, but there is a part of me that knows that that is not the case, that there is more out there. There are hidden depths inside of me, and there are hidden depths to the world, and there is more than this limited version of the world that this restrictive power is telling me is all there is. Additionally, the High Priestess represents periods of coming to accept those waxing and waning forces, that who we are is fluid, that it changes over time, that there is always something that we can learn if we look inwards and listen to ourselves and give ourselves an opportunity to express outward what we want, who we are, who we're becoming, where we want to go, what we want to do. If you look at this in the context of queer tarot, then this can be a card of accepting that one is somewhere on the LGBTQIA spectrum. It can also be learning to accept that they don't know yet, that they're questioning, that they're exploring, that they're going, hey, I don't know which of these labels belongs on me as a person, but I know that I want to explore it. I know that I want to step away from what I'm being told I am and learn what I am for myself while trusting myself. Does that mean that that's always what the card can mean in a reading? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that that's an additional thing to take into account, especially if you know you're reading to someone who's going through that self-exploration cycle. But even if you don't know that a person that you're reading for is going through that self-exploration, it's something to keep in mind if you're pulling a lot of other cards that might additionally say, hey, this could be what's going on with this person. Okay, so recently one of my private tarot students asked me, hey, when you say questions to answer about a card, do you mean that that's what you're asking when you pull a clarifying card? Or do you mean that that's a question that you're asking in general every time you pull the card? Or if you've been pulling the card a lot, like over and over and over again in readings, does that mean that these are questions you ask in the next readings? All of the above. All of the above. Any of these questions can slot into any of those uses. If the answer is within me, how do I find it? What do I need in order to better listen to and trust in my intuition and feelings? How should I go about exploring my subconscious? Are there resources that could provide me with gentle, sheltering guidance instead of rigid, structured, or demanding instruction? Should I be exploring or studying my spirituality? Should I take a non-rational approach to this situation? Is there something that I know, but I don't know how to explain that I know it? Is there a mystery or a secret here? Is it one that I should seek to know? Once I know it, should I keep it secret? Questions to answer when the card is reversed. Why do I struggle to trust my own intuition? Has it betrayed me or led me astray in the past? Or is it just that I feel guilty trusting in myself over trusting in the words of others? Why do I deny what I feel and try to argue myself out of it? Are there any synchronicities or odd occurrences or vivid dreams that I've ignored? Am I trusting in the instruction and guidance of others in a way that I shouldn't be? Do the people who I rely on for help have my best interests and progress in mind, or do they want to shape me to their idea of who I should be? Is my privacy being violated? Are people gossiping about me? Am I gossiping about others? Have I revealed secrets that I should have kept secret? Have I kept secrets that I shouldn't have kept secret? All right. That's everything. I know it was an enormous amount of information. Please remember to like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a comment about what content you want to see more of. I know I've gotten several requests for more rants. I'm actually filming one tonight, so that's coming soon. And thank you, as always, for sticking with us, and be safe out there, everyone. Hi, kitty. Yeah, you're gonna come and be super distracting while I'm trying to teach my class? Yeah? Yeah? Oh. Ow, ow, ow. Maybe don't climb onto my shoulder. You are not actually a parrot. She thinks she's a parrot, but she's not. And because she doesn't actually fit on my shoulder, she digs her bottom claws into my cleavage. Ow! Or grabs onto my hair. Ow. You're very sweet and very snuggly, and chill out a little bit. Maybe just camp on my lap.